Well, hey kids, I've got a real treat for you. I'm going to build a single-ended 2-watt guitar amp into this lunchbox. The thing is, I've already built 3 of these amps this past Christmas and sent them out to friends as Christmas gifts. However, because I work for a living and I can't spend all the time I would like to on these amplifiers, I was kind of rushed in the end, and those amps didn't quite come out the way I wanted them to. They have some flaws. There's a little bit of a hum, and the gain stage is weird because the EF80 power tubes distort very easily and very early. My solution at the time was to take signal out of the preamp stage. In hindsight, that was the wrong thing to do for what I was going for with these amps. But I wanted to get them out before Christmas, and for the most part they were well received. But I know in my mind that it's not the amplifier I wanted to give them. So what I'm going to do here with this amp is fix all the problems from the last set of amps. Same circuit, generally speaking, but improved. I've already made some changes and some upgrades based on changes that I had to make with this amplifier. I built this amp a little over a year ago, last Christmas, and it was another one of those amps that never quite came out the way I wanted it to, and it uses the same basic set of tubes. It has EF80 output tubes. And again, I got nothing but, way too much overdrive and distortion on this. And so after I had sent out those 3 amplifiers for Christmas, I decided to take another look at this one since I was never happy with it. And so I more or less gutted it and replaced it with a known good circuit, the Blackface Micro by our friend Rob. Now, I'm not going to get into this amplifier much at all, other than to say one of the things that is clearly shown on Rob's schematic is that there is a voltage divider that takes nearly 90% of the audio signal to ground before the power tubes, which really cleans it up and makes this a fantastic sounding amplifier. So now that I know how much I need to take out, I'm going to apply that to the Dark Lord amplifier. This is the amplifier that shall not be named due to YouTube copyright infringements, which is a mouthful. So we're going to call it the Dark Lord amplifier. So let's talk about the changes that I'm going to make from the old circuit to the new circuit and everything in between. Firstly, I am beefing up the filter section to get rid of the last little bit of hum I was having. Another change is replacing the Axico 5-watt 5K output transformer to something that is much more suited for this power tube. The Axico 5K you get on Amazon really measures just under 4K. So if you double the speaker load by putting an 8 ohm on the 4 ohm tap and a 16 on the 8 ohm tap, you're still coming in under 8K. The EF80 really needs to see a minimum of 10K. So, with the output transformer under 8K, the tube is running way too hot into the red zone. It needs to be lowered by increasing the load. So, I've been working with Matt at Musical Power Supplies on eBay, and he's making me some of his 3-watt single-ended output transformers at 11K, which is perfect for this tube. It has a true 4 ohm and 8 ohm tap as well. I will be replacing the 5-watt 4K Axico Amazon output transformer with a 3-watt 11K output transformer, which is much better. The basic circuit has a Fender Princeton 5F2A style volume and tone control. Then I added a mid-scoop from a Framus at a fixed point of 470 Hz at minus 6 dB. In this old circuit, I lowered the overdrive of the EF80 power tube by reducing the gain in the preamp, using very hot and very cold biasing on the preamp triodes. The second triode is not bypassed. In the new circuit, I am center biasing both preamp triodes and using cathode bypass caps for full-on preamp gain. Keeping all things the same, it hits the 5F2A volume and tone control, my famous mid-scoop, but then I added a voltage divider to take out 80 to 90% of the signal before it hits the power tube. So this was my circuit for a little while, except then I got to thinking, I really would like to get some more gain out of this preamp. What I want is something that I can get a lot of touch sensitivity, a lot of sustain, and maybe even a little bit of feedback. So what if I was to take this tone control and move it here instead? So what I did was I came up with this. Now we have first gain stage, hits the volume control, hits the second gain stage. No mid scoop, no tone control. So you got full on going right there with both of them bypassed. And then here, in order to get the tone control to work at all, you have to kind of simulate the volume being about halfway. Audio taper pots are generally about 10%, meaning that when the control is in the middle, you've got 10% of the taper on the pot, if with an audio taper pot. If it was a linear taper pot, it would be 50%. Make sense? So at 10% with a 1 meg audio taper pot, you have 900K on the top, and you've got 100K going to ground, which, if you look at it, this is also a voltage divider. You've got some resistance on top, you've got resistance going to ground, more resistance on top than you do going to ground when it's in the middle, feeding this tube. So over here, I simulated that. Now, the numbers and everything that I have in here are all just placeholders and gives me an idea about where it ought to be. But in reality, when I do this, I'm going to set my preamp volume to about 6 or 7, probably right at the onset of preamp distortion. I'll put a oscilloscope on it and see where it starts to distort. Leave it there, and then go over here with a 1 meg audio taper pot and dial it in to where it sounds good. And then I'll come over here to the mid scoop. Now these three values here, the white, the red, and the magenta, give me different amounts of scoop, anywhere from 6 dB down to 8 dB down and 11 dB down. I'll play with that again and then go back and readjust the 1 meg pot as I need to. And then whatever those values are on the top and the bottom of the wiper, I'll tag those in permanently. And there we go. This is my voltage divider. I won't need it over here. I'm already taking anywhere from 83 to 90% of the signal out. And then I can have a regular grid stop up here for the oscillation and a regular grid leak down here. In theory, this should work very nicely. Plenty of front end gain. Here's my signal dropper, tone control, mid scoop, and a proper output transformer for the EF80 tube. In theory, this should work great. And this is what I'm going to build. So one of the most important things, if not the most important thing, is getting the chassis right inside of here. This is a very thin tin lunchbox and is way too flimsy to support the transformers that are going down here. I've got input and output jacks going up here. I got volume and tone controls over here. I've got a power switch and a fuse and a LED light going there, not to mention the tubes are going to go here and poke out the other side. And this tin is just way too thin for that, so I need to make a very form-fitting chassis to fit inside here. And that's where this is 22 gauge metal here that I was cutting yesterday. And it has to fit exactly to the inside shape of this. Front and back, side to side, and I'm going to have a shelf right here that the filter board lives on. Transformers are down here, and then when you shut the lid, this will essentially be a Faraday cage and keep all this signal from emitting RF into the tubes and the components up here. It actually works very nice. But again, the idea is that this has to be as tight fitting inside here as you can get. You can't have it loose, because if you tighten up your components and your screws and your nuts and everything holding it in, this isn't going to bend to shape to here. This will form in and dent in and misshape the outside of this, so it'll look terrible. So exact measurements and exact precision cutting and trimming are required. And so I'm going to measure from here to here, but you also have to be mindful that there's an indentation here. There's a little lip between here and here, and you can see it on the door, and you can see it right here. So I can't go to this far edge, I have to go to this edge. That comes out to 3 9/16 because I just want that I just want the bottom edge to curl under that black lip right there. Three 9/16. What I actually ended up cutting was a little short than that, just under 3 1/2. So if I measure, let's do it this way, 3 9/16, or just under, which is close enough. And it'll also give me a little bit of bend room right there. That's really not bad. Now for the most part, hello Jacob. For the most part, I have pretty much standard hand tools, but every now and then, if you're going to do this, you need some specialized equipment. This is a sheet metal brake. It's meant to bend metal at a right angle, and you can actually go a little further. Harbor Freight sells these for like less than 40 bucks. I can't remember exactly what I paid, 36, something like that. I have it mounted to a piece of 2x4 that I have mounted to another piece of 2x4 that goes the other direction, and then of course put it in a sawhorse. And then I put my sheet metal in here. I get this edge lined up just right. Clamp it down with a couple of C-clamps. And once you measure and measure and measure again, you go ahead and make the bend. I'm going to get this all set up and maybe show you what I mean. Alright, so I'm in here, and it's important to show you a few details. You can see the edge here is just where this clamp is, all the way down. And my measurement, if I put that right up against here and come out, remember it's 3 9/16. Come on. And I'm just a hair under it. And you can see that all the way down as I move down here. It's just underneath 3 9/16. I'm taking into account the thickness of the metal. Clamp these down good and hard. And it's going to take two hands to do this, so I got to put the phone down, but I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. So here we are with it all bent up. And I'm pretty much at a right angle. Let's take it out and measure it. Alright, so here's the piece. Now let's measure it. Now the important thing to know here is we're not measuring from here to here. We're measuring the other side from this edge to here. And it is exactly 3 9/16. Yepper. Alright, for our next trick, we're going to measure in a 1/2 inch on this side and bend it up, and a 1/2 inch on this side and bend it up. When this whole thing gets bent up like this, I'll have a little ledge right there that I can sit my platform on, and then my transformers will live down here, and my board and all my components will live up here on top of the platform. And there you go. So for the time being, that's it for the metal brake. As you can see, this is not a square edge right here. This is a rounded edge. And since I'm trying to form fit this, I have to try to match this round edge as much as possible right here. So how are we going to do that? Well, with these, I'm lucky enough to have a very good surplus store, electronic surplus store in my town, and they sell all kinds of doodads and crazy things, including these aluminum round blocks that are used for, I don't know what these are actually for, but what I'm going to do is none of these are exactly the same curve, but I mean, you can see that I can bend around that, and I can get that curve pretty well approximated. It's going to take some time to actually hammer that into the right spot, but metal hammer, round jig, and a nice square edge here. This is the rail for my porch. It's very rickety, but it will definitely do the job. Alright, so here it is inside the lunchbox, and as you can see here, these corners don't match up. So I got to take it out and bend it around again until I get these to match as tightly as possible. This is very time consuming, and this is why this is the most difficult part of this entire project. Getting this chassis to fit right. Back to keep on hammering. So it took some finagling, some hammering, some pounding as it normally does, but I got these corners a whole lot tighter of a radius to match these corners. I had to notch out a little notch here because this lunchbox had a drink holder clip that lived right here on these little hinges, And so that notch had to notch around here to clear that hinge. I actually might have to cut it a little bit deeper, but I can show you that it's a good tight fit as it needs to be. You can even hear it snap in place. It's that tight. There it goes. These corners are perfectly symmetrical, but these corners here, yeah, I got to take a little more off of that. It fits just inside this lip. This corner kind of locks right there inside that lip, and that is exactly what you want. It really has to be just exactly perfect. This part of the chassis is by far the hardest part of doing this amp, at least for me it is. The most time consuming. But once it's done, it's done. I'm going to take a little bit more off of this notch, and we're pretty well ready to roll with this thing. Awesome.